So I recently finished a game called Chrono Trigger, which is supposedly one of the best classical JRPG games that is not Final Fantasy. If you don't know, Chrono Trigger was created by Square Enix, with well-known developers such as Hironobu Sakaguchi, who is known for Final Fantasy. And then there's also Akira Toriyama, who is the artist. You can clearly see the Dragon Ball style it has. Say what you want about Dragon Ball, but you cannot deny that his art is iconic. And so, being a fan of JRPGs, I played this game and oh boy is it a fantastic game. Chrono Trigger is known for its rich story with time travel elements, interesting take on a turn-based combat that I don't think I've seen to this day, amazing soundtrack by Nobuo Uematsu and some other people, an amazing sprite and art direction that the game goes for, and last but not least, an interesting set of characters that will be with us for the rest of the game. Also, a side note regarding this video, this is the Steam port version, with better graphics, but with some bugs that I will return to later. Also, as a quick side note, there will be spoilers in this video, so I do recommend that you either play the game or not watch this video if you don't want to be mega spoiled. Again, spoiler warning. When you first start the game, you see a fantastic cutscene that is meant to hook you into the game, and in general feels like a traditional anime opening, showcasing who the characters are, some battles, some spoilers, and a good soundtrack that works for Chrono Trigger. And Akira Toriyama's iconic art style works there so well with it. The plot of the game starts as follows. Chrono's mom wakes him up from bed to be ready for the Millennial Fair Festival. And while having fun at the fair and betting on Cadillac, which somehow won, Chrono accidentally bumps into a girl called Marle, and both head out to see Luca's telepod invention. The telepod then turns into a time machine, and Marle gets whisked away, with Chrono giving chase to rescue his new companion. We then see that we have gone back 400 years in time, and through the story, we then figure out that in the year 1999 AD, a creature called Lavos awakens from his deepest slumber and wreaks havoc on the entire world. Chrono sets forth his journey to stop Lavos in the future alongside his comrades Marle, Luca, Frog, Robo, Magus and Ayla. A fun and memorable set of characters for this adventure. Now, I did mention the Millennial Fair, which is something that most games rarely ever starts with, where the player character are having fun at the fair, which is where most JRPG would want to start with the hook of the story immediately. But in my opinion, I think it works that it kinda takes the slow approach first, because after this, the game's story goes forward without stopping or taking a break. I think this works fine. After Chrono bumped into Marle, and we're having fun at the fair, like drinking 8 cokes of cola, or helping this girl find her cat, and then we battle against a robot at the fair, which is where the game tells you about the battle system, and I really like it. Now, let's talk about the gameplay combat, and how different it is from games like Final Fantasy. And both have one thing in common, which is the strategic active time battles, where you choose your character's move in combat. But that is the only common thing here, because Chrono Trigger has something which Final Fantasy does not have: moving enemies. Final Fantasy's combat is static, but Chrono Trigger doesn't have that, and instead the enemies and bosses move around the battlefield. At least in the Steam port version, they have added in a health bar but also a speed gauge underneath the character. And when that yellow gauge is full, the characters have a choice between attacking, using attack or magical attacks, or using an item. What is nice about the combat system is the enemy movements and positioning, because if you use some tech moves, you can damage more enemies if they are in a position to be hit by Chrono's cycle in a circle, or Luca's flamethrower that covers a line. What makes this combat system fun is the engagement, since here you have to stay focused at all times and pay attention to the moving enemies. Not only that, but you can use the enemy movements against themselves. As an example, in the year 2300, there is a robot that shoots lasers when it notices movements, and the rat that always moves around, which will then fire the lasers at the rat, but you may also be collateral damage. Or the year 600, where if you damage the snakes enough, they will then try to heal itself by consuming the enemy frogs as well. Or when you are on an elevator where the multi-headed snakes will go after their own brethren with only one survivor left. This makes the fights more engaging and rewards the player by noticing, or maybe just happens to stumble upon while waiting for the speed gauge to fill up. And my favorite part of the combat system is the dual tech moves, where two characters that have their speed gauge maxed out can do a cool combination attack, which does way more damage and potentially has a bigger attack range. But even cooler than that is the triple tech moves, where all of the characters in a party will do a devastating attack, and it is so cool. The reason for its coolness is that it reminds me of some shonen fights, where multiple characters, just glancing at each other, know exactly what to do in the combat. Jujutsu Kaisen being one of those areas. What is also really cool is that if your party members can use dual and triple attacks, then the enemies can also do those as well. Since the enemies can use each other to attack you, that, in my opinion, is the coolest thing about this game and its battle systems. The characters themselves are memorable, likable, and are just so cool, but there are gripes I have with it. The characters themselves are interesting, don't get me wrong, but I didn't have the problem of who I wanted to choose as my battlers. I mostly used Chrono, Ayla, Robo and Frog, while Luca, Marle and Magus were mostly on the back line. Chrono makes sense because he is the main proxy character, and Ayla is a strong powerhouse that doesn't need to equip weapons, and it's just awesome. Robo and Frog is so cool, both are really strong, and both can heal decently well, even healing multiple people at once, where Marle could only heal one character at a time, except if using a dual tech heal. Luca I just didn't use much, and Magus because he joined basically closer to the end of the game. Again, this has nothing to do with the characters themselves and the way they are portrayed, but it is the combat phase that does it for me. One major strong point of the game is how short the game is, and how little grinding that you have to do. Of course there were some moments where grinding was necessary, but that was only like 2 or 3 levels more, but most of the time I got through tough bosses either by brute forcing my way through, or changing characters and tactics, and mostly that went well. The game paces itself really well and does not go off track and do something else. Sure, there are side quests and stuff, but these are connected to the main objective, defeating Lavos. If I had to compare this game to an anime, it has to be Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, since both have interesting fun characters, and that both of them have stories that move forward and don't go far away from the respective main objective. Chrono Trigger with defeating Lavos, and Fullmetal Alchemist with finding the Sorcerer's Stone, so that the Elric brothers can get their bodies back. Nobuo Uematsu is a name you have heard before, especially if you're a big fan of the Final Fantasy franchise or really like gaming music. Well, the same guy did Chrono Trigger, and oh boy is the soundtrack so good. The opening theme is really good. The random encounter battle music is addictive and fun to listen to. The boss battle OST is so epic to jam to. And Frog's theme just fits Frog's character. The soundtrack as a whole is so good, as even some of the overworld themes are good. The sprite design is really fantastic as well. Now most games do have a fantastic sprite work, and I'm scared that I might just repeat myself in every video that has sprite work, and especially the way they handle each distinct timelines. Normally a JRPG goes from one place to another, and slowly the scenery changes according to how far you've come throughout the story. Chrono Trigger has the character go back and forth between each time eras, so when you're getting used to one place, then it will quickly switch over to the next place in a quick manner. And the pixel art sceneries are just really good, and I feel like sprite art is something even I could do myself if I so desired to learn it. That's how much I prefer the sprite style games. Now, I did mention the Millennial Fair and how fun and cool it is. Well, it does have two uses of the fair, but I'll get back to that. First, I want to focus on a trial section. For context, after saving Marley from the time-traveling accident and returning back to the year 1000, the present time, Chrono is being sent to a trial due to the Chancellor accusing Chrono of kidnapping Princess Nadia, or aka Marley. Now, this whole section is really cool, since it really depends on what you did at the fair, and probably is gauging a player's personality, which will only work if you've played the game completely 100% blind. But I feel like this section should have done a bit more in the later parts of the game, since all it did, depending on how many not guilty verdicts you got, the better reward you get when you get the package in a jail cell. And that is pretty much it. So, I like the idea of the trial system, I just wish that it did more to the plot after the trial, other than giving you a reward when you're hauled off to jail. Of course, maybe there was something I overlooked that I did not notice. The second use of the fair is when you need to obtain a Chrono lifelike doll inside a Tent of Horrors. So to explain the events leading up to this, when you first reach the Zeal Palace above the clouds, a strange child named Janus, which turns out to be Magus, says that one person is going to lose their life. So the events unfold with the Queen using Shala as a way to awaken Lavos, and at that point, we are immediately in a near impossible first battle against Lavos in the Ocean Palace. Everybody gets knocked out, and so Chrono, being the main shonen protagonist, the character that has been with us from start to finish, gets obliterated and ceases to exist. But through the events of getting the Chrono Trigger Time Egg and scaling to the peak of Death Mountain, using the Time Egg lets the surviving members go back through time and save Chrono by using the lifelike doll, using that as a shield, which lets us return Chrono. Now, what is interesting about all of these is that after Lavos gets rid of Chrono, the events leading up to getting Chrono back can kinda be seen as a side quest, because you can actually go after Lavos without Chrono, which probably gets a different ending. Did I mention different endings? Because it does have multiple endings, which really depends on what time and place you defeat Lavos. You can even get the bad ending if you lose against Lavos, which probably many of us done. Now, regarding the Lavos fight itself, it is a bit underwhelming. The Lavos that we initially first see is basically either a ship or something that houses the main core of Lavos. Now, to its credit, when you are at the last phase of a fight, I think it's pretty cool and interesting that as a player, without the use of a guide, will assume that the middle one is actually Lavos, but actually, the right side from us is the actual Lavos core. But other than that, the fights as a whole, from the first phase to the last phase, was a tad bit disappointing, since Lavos is built up to be this menacing creature that has been festering on Earth from the Stone Age era. Of course, I did get one shot the first time while battling a second phase, but all I did was to level my characters up 2-3 levels, change tactics, or more correctly to say I used a guide, and after that it was pretty easy. Except for the final boss fight, there aren't too many gameplay downsides to this game, but there are a few small nitpicky stuff that they will add. Now, one thing I did notice, which I think is only on the Steam port, but it could have been wrong, so correct me on that. But when you are in the shop tab, sometimes you don't see every information that you need regarding how much gold you have, because for some odd reason, the currency number isn't always shown. Sometimes you see nothing or the pricing tag, or that it only shows you have 0 currency. So there are times when you have to exit the shop tab and then have to see the amount at the main menu. Again, this is mostly a nitpick, and more so it's just inconvenient to constantly go to the main menu every time. Another nitpicky detail is the health and speed bar, and just how weirdly out of place it looks. I can't really put into words why exactly I feel like this, but again, this is just me being really nitpicky, which just tells us that this game doesn't have many problems with its story and gameplay and soundtrack. But all in all, I think this game is a really fun game to play, and even after finishing the game and reach the credit, there is also a new game plus, which means that you could do the stuff that you didn't do before reaching the credit, like some sort of the side quest or getting all of the endings. But yeah, this is Ken here, and thank you all for watching. I should have a better ending.